Democratic Congressman John Garamendi of California, a member of the House Armed Services Committee. Thank you so much for talking to us.
Good evening.
So President Trump is calling this a one-shot deal. He's saying Kim Jong Un will not get a second chance if he messes this up. He says that he will size up the North Korean dictator in the first minute. What do you think? Is this history in the making, or will it be an epic flop?
Well, let us all pray that it's going to be history in the making. It's extremely important that these negotiations move forward in a positive way. There's extraordinary risk, however. Much of what your reporter just talked about are the details beyond this one meeting. Certainly, it has the potential of being a very good photo opportunity, and hopefully that will set the stage for a path that would lead to further negotiations on all of those very, very complex issues, not the least of which is what is the role of South Korea in all of this, and Japan and China and Russia. This is not just about the United States and North Korea. All of these countries have a critical role to play in going forward. I think the president has done one thing very well, and that is he has significantly lowered the bar. And that's good, because I wouldn't expect to see denuclearization come out of this first discussion.
Well, yes, of course it's going to happen over time. The president needs to know that this time North Korea is serious. It's the first time they've ever sat down with North Korea on such a topic, and we need to know that they are willing to be transparent. There are Senate Democrats, though, that are taking a hard line on what it would take to pass a treaty with North Korea. What are they saying?
Well, they're certainly saying that it has to be at least as tough as the Iran deal, which the president did back out of, and that is a complete denuclearization. That is all of the elements that are necessary to build a nuclear bomb are not available. We're never going to be able to do away with the intellectual ability to do it, but all of the physical. The one fellow that has actually been to all of the North Korean, or most of, if not all of the North Korean nuclear operations, said it is going to take about a decade to completely denuclearize. He did say, however, that some things can be done immediately. For example, get rid of the bombs and get rid of the fissile material that would make additional bombs. Certainly that would be a major step forward. But I think we also need to understand that there is still a war underway. There's a, if you will, an armistice or a ceasefire. South Korea has asked for a peace treaty. That's going to have to be at least one of the first issues that come up in the second, third, or fourth rounds of discussions, which will not involve the two principles. My concern is that we've had some very tough words back and forth between the two principles. Will they be able to get past that? I hope so, but don't underestimate Kim Jong Un. He is no fool. He is also a very vicious and dangerous person.
Let's not forget
to his relatives
the atrocities to his own people.
Exactly.
Otto Warmbier, to the Japanese, to all of those who have been held captive and tortured, and then the hydrogen bomb that he successfully tested back in September. Now, the whole point is history may not repeat itself. And we know that North Korea can't be trusted. So going into this, obviously, you keep both eyes wide open. But here, I want you to listen to Virginia Congressman Scott Taylor, who stresses the importance of the Senate signing off on a deal with North Korea so that history does not repeat itself. Listen to this.
I think it's extremely important. It's a good point that you bring up, people. Even President Clinton had his deal crafted in a way where he didn't have to go through the Senate, and obviously Obama did the same thing with the Iran deal. I think that's a huge mistake because, as you very well know, what one president does as a deal, if you will, the other one can undo it. So the only way you have that lasting, of course, is to do it as a treaty, put it through the United States Senate.
So what intrigues me is how these two nations reached this point when just months ago they were threatening each other with nuclear war. Is Kim serious, and how is the president going to know if he's bluffing?
Well, he says he'll know in the first minute. I doubt that. I think Kim Jong Un is going to hold a lot of his cards very, very close. I think he's going to smile. I think he wants a photo op, perhaps even more than the president does. Keep in mind that the three generations of the Kim family have tried to have negotiations directly with the President of the United States. They had not succeeded until tomorrow's moment. And so this is a huge public relations issue back home in North Korea. So Kim Jong Un is likely to be very cordial. I think we're going to get a lot of smiles. Is he shining on the president? Well, let's hope not. Let's hope that he's serious about it. But this is not going to be simple. And I'm not at all sure that a treaty is going to be sufficient. It is certainly a major and very important step. But do keep in mind that the United States has backed away from a treaty, as has Russia. So that doesn't provide a guarantee. But what does provide a guarantee is very intrusive observation of what's going on in North Korea.
Congressman John Garamendi, thank you very much. I say they get right into talks and forget the photo op, because that gets nothing done.
Well, it's important. It's an important piece of the puzzle.
Let's get to the talks first and actually accomplish something before, tapping yourself on the back over it. Anyway, Congressman, thank you very much. Great to see you.
Certainly.